If you want to talk about the heritage of our cattle industry here in North America, well, then let's talk about Florida.
We've had cattle in Florida for over 500 years.
Jim Handley, Executive Vice President of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, is my guest today as we'll discuss what the Florida cattle industry looks like today, how they've evolved to meet the demands of the market in the last 20 years, as well as the political issues that affect them.
But we want it based on scientific fact, research, and the facts carry the day. And that's how we arrive at our positions on public policy.
And of course, we're going to have to talk about how they deal with those destructive hurricanes.
We're going to ranch in the paradise of Florida. We're going to deal with hurricanes.
If you thought you knew everything about the Florida cattle industry, stay tuned. You might be surprised on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hi, everyone, and we welcome you here again. This is the Working Ranch Radio Show, and I'm Justin Mills. Glad to have you joining us here on our program today. I hope everyone is getting along well in their fall work. It's, I tell you, we've had actually some pretty unbelievable nice weather up in the northeast part of Wyoming that has allowed us to get quite a bit of work done, getting the water line in. We're going to be weaning calves this next week. We got our heifers preg checked a couple weeks ago, so I tell you, we are getting things done, and that always has to make you feel good. We're going to be talking about weather, of course, as we always do in the latter part of our program, as meteorologist Don Day will be joining us, giving us an idea of what we're going to be looking at for the next 7 to 10 days out there. But on today's show, if you heard there in the intro, we're going to have Jim Handley, who's the executive vice president of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, will be joining us as we're going to get caught up with him. Finally, we've been working on it ever since Hurricane Ian, and I really didn't want to be a nuisance to him because I knew there were way bigger fish to fry, so to speak, in terms of just trying to get caught up with me. But it was good to catch up with Jim, not only to talk about, we're going to spend some time talking about how they deal with just getting through a hurricane. Of course, for other parts of the country, it might be tornadoes, it might be a winter storm, various things. But down in Florida, that's something that they have dealt with on several different occasions. We're going to talk about that. But also, we're really going to get into just the look of the cattle industry there in Florida, the type and the kind and how things have evolved and changed in the last several years for the cattle industry down there. He's a fifth generation rancher himself. And so we're going to get a lot of information from that standpoint. Also, what are some of the political issues that they're focused on for the Florida Cattlemen's Association. So just a lot of information as we focus today on the Florida cattle industry. And I think it's going to be some information in there that I know this might be a long ways geographically from where you're sitting at here today. But you got to realize that no matter what part of the country we all sit in, when we call ourselves ranchers, then in some shape, way, or form, we're all sort of family, and we need to know kind of what is going on in the other guy's world. And I think today's will give you a pretty good glimpse of what goes on in the Florida cattle industry. So I'm excited to have our program here today. Jim Handley, Florida Cattlemen's Association, will be our guest. Right now, thank you to our sponsors of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Biozyme, it is weaning time. So for protection and recovery, think VitaCharge by Biozyme. For more information, visit vitafirm.com/Vita-Charge. And Zoetis, visit inheritprogress.com to request a call with a rep and ask about free TSUs to get you started. Speaking of Zoetis, it is the little things that can derail progress, but your herd can be covered. To find out how you can get less parasites, well, just go to the website at getlessparasites.com for solutions from Zoetis. Also, the American Simmental Association, and there have been some fundamental changes that the American Simmental Association has brought to the tables to help ranchers move their operations forward, from pedigree knowledge with actual performance records to now some very advanced genomics. And in fact, that was a subject we talked about last week, was on genomics. All of that is to provide more predictability to the producers so that you can make management decisions that increase profitability to the rancher. SimGenetics, profit through science. Find out more at simmental.com. And Zenpro Avela 4. Allow your cows and calves to perform to their full potential with Zenpro Avela 4. Right now, it is time to check in with the Captain, Tim O'Byrne. He is the publisher and editor of Working Ranch Magazine, just getting back from a little vacation time. Here's this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land. Every time I get my advance copy of the next issue of Working Ranch Magazine, I'm like that old TV show Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane. I'm on. I turn to the contents page to figure out what's going on in the magazine. And, boy, I tell you, we got a good one here, the November-December issue, page 60, Goodbye Livestock, Hello Bison by Burt Rutherford. We talked about this a couple of weeks back, Justin. The Bureau of Land Management's decision to displace cattle in favor of bison raises concerns. Read up on that, folks. Page 68, P-Bar Ranch, how one Montana outfit put regenerative practices at the top of its makeover list by Katie Hutton. Page 76, this is a good one. Audit, got it. If you're making a profit on cows, and I hope the heck you are, and before the IRS starts circling the ranch like vultures, consider this advice. All right, now this is by guest columnists who are accountants, Paul Barelich and Aya Kanda. And then we have a special treat, a poem by Waddy Mitchell called Dash. If you say your truck's a ranch truck, see if it will pass this quiz. If you had it at least 2 years, check how full the dashboard is. Now you can imagine what's on the dashboard of my truck. And Rancher's Journal, Lazy TV Ranch. And this is an outfit, this is by Jana Thorstensen. An outfit, this is where Dad says 40 hours a week is just a part-time job, and the crew keeps her laughing. So check it out. That's here in the next issue of Working Ranch Magazine, in your mailbox, pretty darn quick. Back to you, Justin. I know you got a heck of a show.
All right, thanks, Captain. And yeah, folks, I'll tell you, it's pretty simple to get a subscription started. So you get that next issue, that November issue coming out in your mailbox. If you go to the website at workingranchmag.com, you can get started here today. Well, coming up next, we're going to be talking about the Florida cattle industry. Jim Handley, Executive Vice President of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, joins us as we talk about the details of that industry there. And also, in light of the recent events of Hurricane Ian, we're going to talk about it all. And you might be surprised on what you hear when we come back on the Working Ranch Radio Show. It's a competitive calf market, and buyers want calves that will perform, period. And a proven solution is Simmental. In fact, data from the Tri-County Steer Carcass Futurity from 2002 through 2018 on nearly 60,000 head of calves revealed that Simmental sired calves represented the highest carcass-valued sire group over English and other continental breed groups. And the sire group that was the second highest carcass value was Sim Angus sire. So, the proof's right there. For low-risk, high-potential calves with earning potential, be confident that Sim Genetics will give you more per head, period. Stand strong, Simmental.
Every little thing is important to cattle producers, from daily chores to parasite control, just like protection is important to us. Based on approved labels, Valbicin suspension covers 25% more parasites and life stages than Safeguard. Visit GetLessParasites.com for more solutions from Zoetis. Consult your veterinarian for assistance in the diagnosis, treatment, and control of parasitism.
And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. We thank you for joining us as we head now into our featured interview. And joining us today is Mr. Jim Handley. He's the Executive Vice President for the Florida Cattlemen's Association. And Jim, we want to thank you for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Good day, Justin. It's my pleasure. I appreciate you reaching out and your interest in learning more about Florida and our industry and our history and our current event.
You bet. I know it's been kind of a booger for you. We've been kind of playing phone tag or email tag for the last couple of weeks, so I appreciate you taking the time because I know infrastructure-wise down there, and we're going to talk more about that here in a little bit, has been a little bit hairy in light of the results of Hurricane Ian. We'll talk about that in a bit. But first of all, Jim, it's interesting. There is a lot of history to our cattle industry in the whole North American continent that really kind of centers and comes through Florida, if you really were to look back on the history of the cattle industry in our country. And so let's just kind of back things up first, and let's talk about the cattle industry in Florida.
Yeah, Justin, not everybody realizes that. Obviously, you do, and folks within the industry understand it, but we've had cattle in Florida for over 500 years. In 1521, cattle came, and the Spanish brought them and obviously left them, and our Native Americans tended to them. And so we've continued to have a strong and thriving industry here for, again, over 500 years. It's fairly significant. We maintain a cow herd of about 930,000 brood cows, a total beef cattle population, all ages, is like 1.6 to 1.7 million. Cattle utilize 5.5 to 6 million acres here in the state. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The makeup of we are primarily cow-calf. We have an abundance of forage, but it's not very high quality, and we certainly are a grain deficit state. And down here in this hot, humid climate where we get 50 to 60 inches of rain a year, it's not real easy to feed cattle. And of course, we don't have processing facilities to really speak of. Mm-hmm. There certainly are a few cull cow facilities, but so we ship approximately 725,000 feeder calves out of Florida on an annual basis. Mm. And then if you want to throw in the dairy side, there's like 115,000 milk and dairy cows in the state. Our ranches primarily ranch on private land, family-owned operations. There is a limited amount of public land that is grazed through a variety of agencies. Certainly nothing like you guys in the West. There is one military installation. It's an Air Force bombing range that has some grazing leases on it. There's some water management districts that have conservation lands, and they have some grazing leases. There's a few cattle in one national forest, and a few cattle on some wildlife management areas. But by and large, the majority are on private lands here in the state. Hmm. And the cattle are right down the ridge of the state, right down through the heart of it. Obviously, If you look at our state, there's I-95 on the East Coast, and I-75 enters the state in the center, and then it bears over to the West Coast. And most of the cattle in the higher populated cattle counties are within I-95 on the East Coast and I-95 on the West Coast. And most of them, the top 15 cattle counties, are primarily north of Lake Okeechobee. Okay. When you get way south, that's more farming, crops, sugarcane, citrus.
Mm-hmm. You bet. Jim, let's talk about the type of cattle, because with you being more in that southern climate, I'm sure there's that type of cattle, the more some of the Bos Indicus you'd see. But I wouldn't say it's primarily that, because I know you also have, the Bos Taurus, the more English type breed or continental breed, crossbreed cattle as well. So let's talk about that makeup that you see within that industry.
That's right. And those original cattle we were talking about are the Spanish Andalusian type cattle. There's not very many of them. They certainly maintain that breed, and there's a few producers that maintain them, but certainly that's not a very big portion of the commercial industry. Our cattle really need some Brahman influence to maintain themselves in this climate. We need a cow with a lot of capacity and a lot of ability to consume a lot of forage, because the quality of our forage, while there's a lot of it, it's not very nutrient dense. So you can count on the majority of the cattle will have an eighth to a quarter of Brahman influence. And of course, we do utilize some continental cattle and some English, some British breeds. and create a pretty darn good feeder calf. Primarily our cattle go to Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. Some will go into Nebraska to be fed. But Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas is probably certainly the top three that receive our feeder cattle. Our industry, we have a lot of large herds. These families have held things together, and quite a few cattle we've got 7 livestock markets that are a real important part of our industry, and then quite a few cattle are also sold private treaty. More are taking advantage of internet sales and marketing that way. Majority of our cattle move starting really the week after July 4th.
Okay. And
we should be wrapping up the big movement certainly by early November. That's when we get them out of here, and we're a little bit ahead of some of you guys, that are in the mountains or in the way west, and that kind of our cattle fit a little bit different marketing window, and they need to, because we're a long ways away from the majority of the infrastructure, if you will. It's like 1,800 miles to say Amarillo, Texas, and so we're filling the pipeline a little bit ahead of a few folks in the west.
Yeah. Jim, certainly since the cattle first entered that state, as we talked about a little bit ago, but if we were to move that up a little bit, in the last 20, 30 years, what have you seen changes in the type and kind of cattle in Florida?
Dramatic improvement. I'm a fifth-generation Floridian. I grew up right in the heart of the big cow counties, and been engaged with the industry all my life, and there's dramatic improvement, genetic selection. Our cattle years ago had a reputation of being kind of hard to handle and a little bit fractious at times, and probably not the best grading cattle, but our cattle will stand up. We've really dramatically improved it, and we're not a very big state as far as seed stock from the standpoint of there's not a real big number of seed stock producers down here, and I will attribute some of that to the fact that we don't grow a lot of feed, and we don't have access to a lot of high quality feed and forage, and so our people rely on a lot of breeders from all over the country putting cattle in here, and we can do a good job of raising a mama cow, raising replacement heifers, and we buy a tremendous number of bulls of all breeds from we get some Montana bulls in here. We get certainly Nebraska, Kansas, a lot out of the southeast states north of us. There was a sale here yesterday with cattle from Tennessee. But to answer your question, we've seen a dramatic improvement. Our cattle will stand up and convert and grade when you get the hide off of them. I dare say people are quite pleased with how many cattle will grade choice.
You bet. A moment ago, you talked about some of the ranches that are quite large there and families that have been able to keep things together and keep it going. I think that was a surprise, is something that I didn't realize, is you actually have some pretty large ranches in Florida.
We do. Certainly, if you look at some of the lists that are created about cow-calf operations, typically every year in that work that CattleFax, as an example, puts together. And again, that's folks voluntarily participating in that. But typically there'll be 10 to 12 of the top 25 in cow numbers, not in acreage. Yeah, we can stock pretty densely. The average in the state is like 6.5 acres per cow-calf unit. Of some you may have 2.5 acres per mama cow. In some places we may have 20 acres per brood cow, but the statewide average is right at 6.5 to 7 acres. If you looked at the list, certainly the Deseret cattle and Citrus is the single biggest one. They have a very large cow herd, and then I can rattle off some others. Yeah. We have a Native American tribe, the Seminole tribe, who has a large number of cattle. And then a multitude of different families. We have a range cattle experiment station that's a part of our land grant system from the University of Florida. And I've had those professors say, yeah, there's more 500 head cow herds in 150 miles of this unit than anywhere in the country. They're just pretty dense, big operations.
Yeah.
And because of their size and their investment, they've had to improve their cattle.
Yeah.
They had to create better cattle to chase premiums. And that's, there certainly has been incentive for people to improve their cattle.
You bet. Yeah.
Chasing more economic return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
But just like other parts of the country, everybody diversifies and has a variety of different crops that they may grow to spread their risk and to, spread their cash flow.
Yeah.
So depending on where you are in the state, if you're way up north than the Panhandle, there's more traditional crops grown up there, peanuts, cotton, soybeans. You come on south and there's combination of timber guys with cattle. You keep coming on and they're, because we have such a growing population and development, there's a lot of turf grass grown on ranches. And then there's certainly citrus and cattle grown on places. And then the further south you come, there's produce. There's a tremendous number of watermelon farmers down here, or acreage of watermelons and citrus. And so those combinations are real common on our ranches. The exact makeup of the crop depends on where you are. We've got some that are big winter vegetable growers that would grow a lot of, green beans, carrots, celery, lettuce. There's one section or two in the state that grow a lot of potatoes. So it's quite diverse as a state from the standpoint of agriculture. But the oldest that we're proud of is the cattle industry, and we continue to maintain a pretty strong footprint, again, with 1.6 million beef cattle.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the diversity just of the agricultural industry as a whole is quite unique to probably a lot of other states. Maybe the only one that could sort of match that would be California, and you guys are very unique in that. Jim Handley, Executive Vice President of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, is my guest today. We're going to continue with him, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how they're recouping after Hurricane Ian that took place a couple, 3 weeks ago, and how that's coming along when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. It's weaning time, one of the biggest days of the year for you and the most stressful for your calves. Ensure a smooth transition with the VitaCharge weaning program. This two-step program with the AmaFirm Advantage gives calves the nutritional boost they need to get through the first weeks of weaning, accelerate appetite, increase weight gain, and improve health. It's weaning time. Get them ready with VitaCharge. For more information, visit vitafirm.com/Vita-Charge. And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. Our focus here today, we're talking about the Florida cattle industry, and none other than Jim Handley, who's the Executive Vice President of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, is joining us here on our program today. And Jim, just a moment ago as we were talking off air, you were talking about coming up in April of this next year will be 25 years for you. So first of all, congratulations to that. But as it was kind of leading and segueing into our next conversation that we're going to have, and that is about how are things going now with after Hurricane Ian. And you said that was number 14 for you. So, nevertheless, I know it kind of was in for you and I to kind of get hooked up and get this interview done. We were dealing with a lot of that. So, how are you guys doing and getting by with after Hurricane Ian?
Well, we're digging out, Justin. We have a resilient, tough set of people, just like in your country and all over the country. A lot of high quality, good, conservative, hardworking people. We took a pretty good shot with this storm that hit us and suffered a tremendous amount of flooding and a lot of high winds. I looked at the footprint of the storm's path, and I think it represents right at 42% of our mama cow herd that the track of the storm went through 11, 12 counties. And then we started suffering flooding up in the St. Johns River area, and those poor guys are underwater as well as a result of the rain that came from the storm. They didn't get a lot of wind damage, but they certainly got flooding. But we're working our way through it, trying to help our ranchers. We've had tremendous outpouring of love and generosity and support and contributions to our Florida Cattlemen's Foundation. That's what we're channeling our relief effort through. And we've set up some supply yards and receiving product from a number of outstanding feed companies and post and wire companies, and primarily trying to help people hold their cattle together because they've had such high water and there's still standing water. I was loading some post and fueling a guy up this morning, one of our ranchers, and I said, is it going down? He said, it stopped rising, and he said maybe an inch a day. Oh. And then he drew a line across himself, and it was about 4 foot high. And so he's got cattle kind of trapped on high islands, and they're hauling hay and range cubes and things to them. But we're digging out. It's been so wet, it's hard to get in and patch fence. And when we suffer these storms, there's a tremendous amount of trees down on fences. And as long as the trees still have their leaves, old cows are kind of bluffed and won't find all the holes and crawl out. But as it starts drying out and they're moving, looking for a little bit better nutrition, they will find the holes. And that's when we'll have to elevate our fence crews, volunteers that are coming from unhit counties to move in with ranching families that have been hit and to help them run chainsaws and front end loaders and stretch wire and patch fence. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, our experience has us fairly well prepared in thinking through how to bring our state and our economy back to life. Mm-hmm. But in the ranching side, you've got living creatures, and once we know all our people are okay, then we start focusing on our livestock, and they need to eat every day and need good fresh drinking water. And so that's where the focus turns to. And then you start putting your infrastructure back on the ranches. I mean, hay barns, equipment sheds, shops, every mineral feeder, every set of cow pens that had, working shade roofs over them. They're pretty much gone. And you would know, Justin, ranchers accumulate that over time. You build a new shop this year, and 2 years from now, a new horse barn or something. But over the lifetime of a family multi-generation ranch, in one afternoon, poof, it's gone. Yeah. And so it makes everything you do more difficult, and you have to rebuild your infrastructure. So it's eating an elephant one bite at a time, but there's been some smiles on some faces of these people. We've been mobilized with a crew of volunteers, aside from myself and a couple other employees of the association. It's volunteers from unheard areas, helping folks in these areas. We've got a livestock market at Arcadia Stockyard, and they've allowed us to utilize their parking lot as a supply station. And we've got volunteers here running forklifts, and we've got semi-loads of feed parked here, and we're doling it out. Semi-loads of post and wire and staples, and we're doling it out to folks. We purchased a tanker load of fuel, and half of the load's diesel and half of the load's gasoline, so people can keep their vehicles running on the ranch and their generators running if they're operating on generator power. Mm-hmm. And so we're doing anything we can to help people. If they're involved in livestock business and they pull in here and we don't ask for any qualifications, you need help? Yes, sir. We're here to help you. Mm-hmm. And we're gaining on it. The week of the storm, 4 of our livestock markets made the decision, and we thought it was a wise decision, to not run. Therefore, quite a few of the order buyers sat it out that week because we don't want, cattle out of market or in transit, trucks having trouble getting here. With all this flooding, we had a large number of roads closed. And so just accessing places is difficult. So those markets, with the exception of one day, all ran this week, and we're getting back to a bit of normalcy, and we're back open for business, if you will, with the movement of livestock. My friends in other commodities, they've suffered a big hit as well. The citrus industry, the early crop, they'd start picking those things in another 30 or 40 days, and they shook off the tree. I've heard from 80% fruit loss to as 80 to 90% drop, what we refer to as drop to up to maybe the lowest herd areas, 20-25%. So there goes their crop. We still, in most cases, have an animal to sell. We have suffered the loss of some cattle, and until it dries out and you can ascertain the exact damage, we don't know how many animals we've lost. Mm-hmm. We weren't in the heart of calving season. There's not a lot of baby calves on the ground this time of year, which is a positive. But I know we have suffered the loss of some animals.
You bet. A moment ago, you talked about the sale barns, some of them shutting down for just a period of time, now kind of getting back online again. You were also talking in the first segment about the major time of moving cattle out of Florida on some of the new crop calves out of Florida would be from July through November. So we're kind of dead center into that. How's that going to affect these guys with that hitting in the middle of that? Are you going to you said you were back online with some of these sale barns, but is there going to be any major effect with the typical normal movement that happens?
Well, certainly they have to shift things around, and when these cattle are under stress conditions, certainly they want to get them out of here. So I talked to a big order buyer this morning, and he's right down here where I'm at. I know he said he's got 15 or 20 loads expected to start shipping the middle of next week, and they're all systems go. But the cattle have been stressed a bit, so we're certainly going to see some shrink. If the water hangs around here, you're going to the mosquitoes will get bad, and so that puts stress on the cattle. We've maintained some very hardy, tough cattle from a genetic standpoint, and they'll be okay. But we do need to get them out of here just to get them off the cows, so those cows can mend up. We don't have a winter like you folks, but when the nights cool off, our grass quits growing, and we typically supplement for about 120 days through the winter just to maintain body condition and get our cows bred. Mm-hmm. So we've been experiencing a very good shipping season with everybody telling me their weigh-ups have been really good above last year. There was a lot of optimism, and there still is long-term a lot of optimism, but when you stress your cows and stress your forages with standing water on it and all, then you start worrying about, I've got to maintain body condition to get these cows bred and to have strength in them when they calve, so they'll milk strong and breed back. And it's hard to measure long-term effects because with our production cycle. Mm-hmm. We hope we have a mild winter, and we hope we have a nice early green up with moisture in the spring, and we'll get through it. Mm-hmm.
Jim Handley, Executive Vice President of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, is my guest today. We were just talking here about how they've recuperating after Hurricane Ian. By the way, they are handling a lot of those donations through the Florida Cattlemen's Foundation. They're needing things like posts, barbed wire, staples, hay, range cubes, chainsaw, fuel, and oil, those kinds of things as they clean up. If you want to find out more about that, you can go to the Florida Cattlemen's Association's website and find out more about that. We have one more segment. Jim is going to come back for one more segment. When we get into that, we're going to be talking about some of the issues that they're focused on at the Florida Cattlemen's Association, and also some of the relevance to that from the national standpoint for ranchers all across the country. We're going to get into those when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Set up the next generation for a productive lifetime with Zinpro Avela 4. Achieve productive success in your cows with 20% increased conception rate and a 16-day tighter calving interval. Calves from cows supplemented with Zinpro hit the ground running with improved immunity and 28 more pounds at weaning. Allow your cows and calves to perform to their full potential with Zinpro Avela 4.
And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. As our featured interview here today is with Mr. Jim Handley. He's the Executive Vice President of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, and we're talking about that industry in that southeastern part of the country. And earlier on, we were talking about the heritage that it supplies to our entire beef industry here in North America as a whole, as cattle were introduced into that part of the country years and years ago. And in the last segment, we were talking about their cleanup efforts and how how the hurricanes have affected their industry. Jim, I want to get now into current topics just a little bit, and let's talk about some of the issues that you all specifically, maybe with the Florida Cattlemen's Association, are working on that are more on the political side of things, and some of the things that you all handle at the Cattlemen's Association in terms of issues that affect the beef industry there in Florida. So what are just a couple of those items?
Well, Justin, we're not dramatically different, other than we don't have quite as many of the public land issues that I think you guys, a lot of folks have in the West. But we're certainly focused on the forthcoming development of the Farm Bill. Transportation is a huge issue for us. We are in favor of pursuing a continuous waiver for livestock haulers on the hours of service. We all know that it's important to get our cattle loaded and moved and gone as rapidly as possible to wherever their destination is. It limits for their care and well-being. We need to get them gone and moved, and stopping and our drivers and shutting them down for extended periods of time isn't necessarily good for us. Certainly not for the well-being of the cattle, and so that is real important to us, something we've been focused on. Of course, all the tax issues that we all want to be careful that we're not overburdened with unnecessary tax. We definitely don't want to see a change or anything that's going to modify the estate tax. Everybody's, they have land, their assets is their land, but they don't have a tremendous, it's a low margin business. And so, basically anything that affects the economics in the industry, we want to be involved in. And we are an affiliate organization of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and we work quite closely with them. We have a large, obviously with our 22 million people, we have a large delegation in Washington of members. I think this year after the reapportionment, there's going to be 29 votes that we would have with our 2 senators and 27 members of the House. And so we're constantly engaged with them on everything from the Endangered Species Act to adequate funding to the USDA. Certainly one thing that we've worked on, because we feel as though we're real vulnerable as a state, is animal disease management. And we've been participating in a pilot project on individual animal ID and electronic ID from the standpoint of being able to track cattle movement should a disease outbreak occur. We ship so much out of state, and we have like 17 ports and a tremendous amount of traffic from all over the world coming to this state. We're vulnerable to, outside potential problems. And that being the case, we can manage a disease and quarantine a small area. That wouldn't shut down our entire industry. And we think a tool to do so would be individual animal identification strictly for animal disease prevention and management. So that's something we've been a part of in learning the technology. We said, well, this is on the horizon. We want to make it as friendly as possible to our industry that makes the most economic sense, and that the cattle movement would be not impeded, and we want everything to operate at the speed of commerce. We don't want to give away any more information than possible. Certainly, we want to maintain people's confidentiality, but from a disease management standpoint, we think individual animal ID is really important and needs to happen. When you talk about the Farm Bill, there's so many elements to it, but the conservation title is real important to us here in Florida with the growth and the development. There's a variety. There's some state and federal conservation easement programs that some of our private landowners have participated in and see it as a tool to keep their ranches operational for the next generation, and not all of it is being developed. So we would focus a fair amount on programs through the USDA NRCS. And then, of course, some of the risk management programs are real important through the Farm Service Agency, and the forage insurance program is real important. On the nutrition side, we want to make sure that we don't lose any ground as far as beef is concerned, as being given a fair shake in the food guide pyramid and those kind of things. But I would say my friend Jim Magagna at the Wyoming Stock Growers, you happen to be in Wyoming, Justin.
Yep.
He and I will sit at a meeting and we'll share notes, and pretty much the things he's worried about are the things we're worried about. In y'all's case, it might be grizzly bears and wolves. In our case, it's the Florida Panthers from a predation standpoint, or it's a vulture problem down here, those kind of things. But if it's going to affect the economics of your ranch, it probably is going to affect ours.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to maintain a business climate in which you might find profitability. Certainly don't want to be overburdened with regulation. We've real concerned about the waters of the U.S. and the jurisdiction that might be granted to the federal EPA. In our case, that's pretty much most of the acreage in Florida if they change the definition. And now that does is encumber how we manage our property.
Mm-hmm. Jim, what I find interesting with that, and I guess in my mind when I first voiced that question, I was thinking, there's probably going to be something real dynamic or unique to the Florida cattlemen that they're really focused on. And as you went through that list, and I wrote that list down, everything starting with the Farm Bill to transportation, estate tax, endangered species, funding at the USDA, animal disease, conservation easements, waters of the U.S. You know what? As you were saying, you said at a meeting, and you could sit down with Jim Magagna with the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, and you guys could almost just be lockstep as far as the issues. That to me says a lot, because I think there's elements within our industry that have really created some divisions within cattlemen. But at the end of the day, there really are a lot more uniform issues that we all need to be on, rather than some of these things that are bringing division within our industry.
I would agree, and we're not all going to agree on every. You're going to cheer for your ball team today, and I'm going to cheer for mine. We're not going to all agree on every single matter, but we have enough in common and enough needs to defend our industry and to attempt. By no means do I guarantee everybody's going to be profitable, but to attempt to maintain a business climate in which you might find profitability. Certainly there are some controversial issues and all, but we believe in the science. We want the facts and base everything on facts, not on emotion. Mm-hmm. And that's the way we look at every issue. And does it benefit everybody? I was thinking about it, and there's been years when we've signed on letters regarding brucellosis in the park out there, and the bison herd, because we know if I can help our friends in the West on an issue, they'll turn around and help us on an issue that's close at hand down here. So a lot of smart people volunteer and give of their time to our state and national associations. And we ask them every time we come forward with a position on a policy, is it based on factual information? Does it benefit everyone? And is it good for the collective whole of the industry and the environment? And that's how we base our decisions. Certainly there's some emotional things, and you'll have somebody individually affected by something. But we want it based on scientific fact, research, and the facts carry the day. And that's how we arrive at our positions on public policy. Mm-hmm.
Jim, my final question here today, you've got a governor there in the state of Florida that would be fairly recognized across the country. My question, Governor Ron DeSantis, how has he been to work with for you all as the Florida Cattlemen's Association and his view on the beef industry?
I would say it's all positive. Governor DeSantis it certainly didn't come from an agriculture background. And he's never pretended such. He certainly doesn't know our industry that well, but we've spent a lot of time and effort to introduce him to our industry and to help him understand, he and his people understand our footprint and our heritage and the economic benefit and the environmental benefit that ranching has on the state. And he certainly is understanding. He's a pro-business guy. He's a fellow that doesn't want government to encumber people. And he wants it to make logical sense, but he recognizes that there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of outstanding business thinkers within the agriculture, certainly within the ranching community, and he's been good to work for, He's not come up with different ideas that hurt us, and I can say nothing but positive things.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jim, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us here today. I know you're busy, as you were saying just early this morning. You were helping some folks load supplies out in some of the cleanup of Hurricane Ian, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And just some final comments from you.
Well, we just thank everyone for thinking about us and keeping us in their thoughts and prayers. There's been tremendous outpouring of support and generosity. Folks have made contributions of supplies, equipment, cash. They've made contributions to our foundation, and we're turning every dime into assistance to livestock owners and families that are in need. And we'll do our best to reciprocate when you guys get in a bind over some catastrophe. We don't have the corner on the market. It was just our turn, and I said it in an interview, I think, last week, and not making light of it, but a snowstorm is the problem for you guys to ranch in beautiful mountain country. And if we're going to ranch in the paradise of Florida, we're going to deal with hurricanes. And this is a tough industry with a lot of good people. The best people in the world make a living with a cow, and we'll get through this as we have in the past. But we thank you all for your thoughts and prayers, generosity, kindness, and we look forward to seeing you in the days ahead. The biggest favor anybody in the listenership could do is consume one of the best protein in the world and enjoy our product.
You bet. Well, Jim, again, thanks for joining us. Jim Handley, Executive Vice President of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, our guest here today. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to help them out down there with some of the hurricane relief, you can go to the Florida Cattlemen's Association. They are doing all of that work through their Florida Cattlemen's Foundation, and you can give them a call. You can go to their website. There's information there that you can help them out. Well, stay with us. Coming up next, meteorologist Don Day steps in as we take a look at that long-range weather forecast. We'll be back on the Working Ranch Radio Show after this.
How do you decide which heifers to select or sell? Visual inspection alone leaves a lot to chance. Back your hunch with Inherit Select from Zoetis. It's a genetic test designed for commercial replacement heifers. You gain valuable predictions, including cow fertility, size and soundness, feed efficiency, growth and carcass merit, as well as easy-to-use economic indexes. This improves your selection, breeding, and marketing decisions. Request a call from InheritProgress.com and ask about free TSUs to get you started.
And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. Justin Mills, as we're joined now by meteorologist Don Day with a look at our weather. And Don, when you look at the western half of the country in this coming week, it's going to be kind of slow till we get into the weekend. But the eastern half, if you look east of the Missouri River, looks like they've kind of got winter coming on.
Yeah, I tell you, there's going to be some significant cold for that part of the nation here over the next 7 to 10 days. Could even be looking at approaching some record cold in some areas of the upper Midwest, lower Midwest, with a shot of Canadian air. And not only is it just a shot of Canadian air, but it's an area of persistent colder temperatures that'll be found really from about the Missouri, Mississippi River basins to the east. This will be especially true in the Great Lakes, Corn Belt. The Corn Belt will see some freezing temperatures, and some of the first snowflakes of the season will grace parts of the northern Great Lakes, even far northern, higher elevations of the northeastern United States as well. So while cold is going to be locked up on that side of the nation, it's high pressure that'll be dominating in the west.
Mm-hmm. You have referred to what is setting this up has a lot to do with the water temperatures off the coast of Alaska, and that's warmer as compared to a 30-year average, and that warmer waters there is kind of creating these weather patterns that we've seen.
Yeah, they're helping to induce a really strong jet stream across the North Pacific. Now, we usually do see this as we get deeper into the fall, where that jet stream gets busier, gets stronger, and more active. But there is a big difference in sea surface temperature from the equator up to the higher latitudes. Warmer than average in those higher latitudes, colder than average down near the equator. So there's a lot of gradient going on, and those gradients really help drive changing weather patterns. So what we're seeing evolving here this week and next week, the next couple of weeks as we head towards November, is a strengthening, more energetic jet stream, which means more dips, more dalliances from those higher latitudes to those lower latitudes. And that's what folks in the Midwest are going to see this weekend and next week, is going to be some shots of that colder Canadian air as you start to see air masses move more vertically, more up and down, north and south across latitudes, and that can bring those big changes in the weather.
So for the coming week, we're seeing the western part of the country, fairly mild weather, the eastern part of the country, a little bit more wintry weather, the northeastern part of the country. What about the southern plains? And let's even scoot back into Arizona and New Mexico a little bit. I know they've been on a little bit different weather pattern than maybe the southern plains of Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas, but let's focus on that area for just a bit and what you anticipate to see the next 7 to 10 days.
Well, interestingly enough, there's been a lot more rain falling in parts of Arizona, especially New Mexico and parts of West Texas, from little low pressure systems that have been basically cut off. We call them cut off lows that have been spinning around northwest New Mexico and parts of the desert southwest. And they've got another one of those. So there is going to be a little more rain down there. So if there's one part of the West, Southwest United States, Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas, more showers and thunderstorms. Some of that will get into parts of western and southwest Oklahoma, but the other part of the southern plains, into the Delta area, they're kind of missing the precipitation. And while they will feel the effects of the colder weather, there won't be a lot of moisture with it. The better moisture will be into the areas that will be more to the north and east.
All right. Well, Don, I appreciate you joining us. We've talked about in previous shows, we're going to be having an upcoming show where we give a long-range forecast of the winter weather. Looks like in a couple of weeks, we're planning to get that done.
Yes, sir. We'll be all ready to go. I'm sharpening my pencil, and I'll be ready.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us here today and giving us a weather outlook for the next 7 to 10 days.
Talk to you soon.
Meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather today. By the way, his website can be found at dayweather.com, and that's also a link where you can find his daily video podcast that he kicks out every Monday through Friday morning as well. Well, stay with us. Coming up next, we'll put a wrap on this week's show and some final thoughts when we come back on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Do you have a young child, grandchild, niece, or nephew that loves the weather and wants to learn more? Day Weather has produced a children's weather journal full of weather facts, fun weather experiments, coloring pages, and pages to record weather observations for every season of the year. The weather journal is for ages 3 to 7 and designed to be fun and educational. The interactive weather projects are fun for the whole family to take part in. For only $10, the Day Weather Journal is a great gift idea for any occasion. Click on our Amazon link to order at dayweather.com.
Well, as we head back to the barn on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show, don't forget, coming up in a couple weeks, meteorologist Don Day will be joining us for the entire show as we take a real long-term look of the weather out into the spring and summer of 2023. Also, some other programs we're working on, and that is a series on low-stress cattle handling with Steve Cody. Also have been in talks with Whit Hibbert on that as well. That's some shows that I know folks have enjoyed in the past, so stay tuned and tune back in for some of those shows coming up here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Well, if you heard something here today you have a question about, or you'd like to get a hold of me about a topic you'd like us to cover, my email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Also, if you heard something today you want to go back and listen to, or also listen to any previous shows, our podcast site is workingranchradio.com. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. Be sure to join us next week at this same time, same place. I'm your host, Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.